There's a game that came out for old gen that looks a lot better and performs better than many games of today. This game is objectively a technical marvel when it comes to the visual side, when it comes to character design. You may not like the story, but the way that everything is constructed in this game and everything is thought out is just impressive. I'm, of course, talking about God of War 2018. That is what we're going to discuss today. We're going to look a little bit at the story from my perspective because there are some things that I've seen people talk about that I want to address. We're also going to talk a lot about the technicalities and why a lot of decisions were made to this game that makes it different from the previous God of War entries. And of course, as always on this channel, on all my dissected videos, we're going to have Kratos' 3D model. So make sure you watch the whole video for that, and let's get started. So God of War is a game made by Santa Monica Studios. These studios, from my research, it looks like they dedicate for the most part to make God of War games. They have an external development studio that it's dedicated to helping other titles, but like the core of Santa Monica Studios mainly doing God of War games. Now, if you've seen my videos before, you know that I'm mainly a PC player. Aside from PS4, I haven't owned any consoles, so I've only played God of War 3, which is actually one of the video games that I bought the PS4 for, and God of War 2018, then God of War Ragnarok. Now, from the God of War games that I've played, they've always been very cinematic. So I remember when I was playing God of War 3, there were these long sections where Kratos was just going around this giant beast, or these like the Titans when it's climbing Athena, or when you're doing this awesome kill moves on Poseidon, Hades, and all that. To me, these games have always been cinematic, not as movie-like as they are today, but they've always had a cinematic aspect to it. Now, let's talk a little bit about the story, because that's something that I've seen a lot of videos discuss. I just want to get my take real quick. See, God of War has always been, from what I've searched from the previous God of War and from what I played in God of War 3, a story about Kratos looking for revenge on those who wrong him. And it was very cool and it was very fun. But as soon as God of War 3 ended, to me, the arc of Kratos was complete. The writers wrote themselves into a corner. And they're honestly like, because I've seen a lot of people, and I was one of those people at one point where I wanted the Kratos from God of War 3, but then I realized, looking at it from a writer's perspective, what are you going to do? Who is he going to be angry at? Why is he going to be angry at another pantheon of gods when they have not done anything to him? He deleted everybody, and he ended up deleting himself at the end with the sword. He didn't achieve that, but again, the arc was complete. That's it. He got rid of everything. Somehow he ended up in the Norse mythology, and we needed a reason for him to fight these gods. Yeah, the reason that they gave us with the kid, and the fact that the kid is the son of a giant, and Baldur not being happy about that. Now, at least in God of War 2018, some people say that, hey, it's emasculated for Kratos and all that, but the fact that he has a son, he has something to worry about, is to me a good plot point, something that drives him. And the fact that the Norse mythology is hunting his son because he's the son of a giant. If you know, I'm very big on Greek mythology. I do like Norse mythology, but I'm not super knowledgeable in it. But I do know that at least the Aesir didn't like the giants very much. So they pretty much want to get rid of all of them, and his son being the son of a giant makes all the sense for it to be a fight. Now, there is this thing about his mother Ashes where it's more of them wanting to make this like an Oscar type of movie. And yes, there are these bits and pieces here and there where he kind of has this heart to heart with Atreus, which to me, they were from a gamer. I like movies too, but from a gamer's point of view, they were really unnecessary because, yes, you want to show growth, but there are many ways that you can show growth instead of just pausing the whole game and having a heart to heart. This is a video game. This isn't a movie. In fact, there are many parts of the games where you're playing with Atreus, where you can see the bond without them having to stop and talk, and this like Kratos trying to reach him. And I know a lot of people are going to brown nose and say, oh, it's so deep. It's a video game. It's not a movie. So there's my complaints with the story. Now, when it comes to the gameplay between God of War 3 and this game was switched around. Like, it was a radical change because in God of War 3, you have this big perspective where you can appreciate the scale of the environment, and you can actually see how tiny Kratos is compared to all his enemies and everything he has to fight, which makes him all the more powerful. I thought it was a cool way to showcase things inside of video games. Also, a very fun way to do puzzles and all that. In this game, they decided to go with a close-up camera, and I thought it was a little weird the way that you have like time attacks that coming from the back, where you no longer have an actual visual but an indicator that something is behind you. The reason why it was made this way, it's not only because of what I've heard that they want you to be closer to the character, closer to the action, but there's also a technical reason that we're going to discuss in a little bit. Other than that, like the combat with the axe is very cool. There's not a lot of variations in the enemies. This game still had a lot of the original God of War 3 and all the God of War series with these massives, because there's a fight with the dragon and when you fight the trolls and all that. I think it was very fun, and the fight with Vulture, I think it was amazing. It was epic to me. Those moments of gameplay that this game had, I don't like the RPG-ness of it, where you have so many things to take into account, and this armor and the wrist and the waist, and that's just to pad out the gameplay with side stories and stuff. I know the other God of War has like different weapons and stuff, but that's it. You don't have all these bits and bobs from the armor. I know it can make Kratos look very cool. I just wasn't a fan of the RPG-ish of this part of the game. There's also a lot of slow segments, and this involves like when you're on the boat, when you're climbing, when you're like opening doors, going through stuff. I've heard, again, a lot of complaints, but there is a technical reason why this exists. We're going to talk about that in a little bit too. But let's move on to the visuals themselves. From what I've researched, the engine that they use for this game is their proprietary engine made in Santa Monica Studios. It has a great lighting system. At least here, from the looks of it has very cool dynamic lighting. It's not ray tracing, thankfully, and we still have fantastic reflections. We still have fantastic dynamic lights. So this proves that still can be done with a video game like this. Now, overall, the world, you can see that the textures are very high, but there are certain points where I don't know if the textures like either didn't load or they're just very low res. Not everything has to be super high res. There are some decisions that developers have to make into what is going to be the highest resolution, what's going to be a little bit of low resolution, because that's part of optimization. Something that if you want to know more about optimization, I have a video on the channel about that. So now into the technical portion, and I'm going to cover some things that I've heard on some other videos that they didn't like from this game, and it has to do with the slow segments, like when you're climbing, when you're rowing the boat, like I mentioned before. And I'm gonna ask a question. Did you see any loading screens when you were in game? I'm pretty sure some of you will answer no. But the fact is, there are tons of loading screen inside this game. They are just masqueraded by certain points in the game. So when you go on the boat, when you go from Freya's house into the main lake, that is a loading screen. When you see Kratos taking his time opening the door, that is a loading screen. When you see Kratos slowly climbing up, that is a loading screen. So I see a lot of people saying like, well, this is, it's so boring, it's unnecessary. But honestly, what do you prefer? Do you prefer an actual loading screen where it just fades and says loading and just a bunch of text like most games? Or would you rather something like what they had going on here? I think a lot of us want to see motion instead of just a wall of text. Just being honest. The other thing is, this was my complaint too. A lot of people were saying like, why did they switch from wide angle camera to a close-up shot? So aside from the story bits and this being more cinematic, it also has to do with technology. Remember, this game firstly came out for the PlayStation 4. It needed to kind of like juice it up, but still work within its parameters. So I believe in the PlayStation 4, it worked at 30 frames per second. I do have the PlayStation 4 Pro, and that kind of works a little bit above 30 frames per second. And on PC is just, over 100 frames per second. One of the reasons that they had that camera is because one optimization bit that I forgot on my optimization video, which is culling. Culling means occluding things that are not in the view of the player. So the fact that you have a close-up camera avoids the rendering of a lot of things, and you can add more detail. This is one optimization choice that you can have for a video game, and I think it was a very smart one. Everything that you see about this game, and this is why this game is so technically impressive, aside from story and other things you may not like, the fact is this game is a masterpiece of technicality when it comes to video game development. All of the decisions that they had to make in order to get all of this detail crammed into a video game that wasn't for the PS5. It was for the PlayStation 4, so it's already... If the PS5, I already felt that the PS5 was an outdated console when it came out. This was made for the PS4, so even way back. Now, this gets us into that conversation and the title of this video. Why do games not look like this on current hardware? The promise was that a lot of games will look the way that this game looked and will run well. Well, here is the reason. The reason why games don't look like God of War 2018, even though God of War 2018 it's already old gen, is because this isn't an open world game. Most of the games that I see people complaining about in the way that they look, they're usually open world games. They're wider angle view games than God of War. All of the things that I explained to you were made for this game, God of War, to look the way it looks. If the game was open world, if the game had a wider angle camera, you wouldn't have such a high fidelity detail. And if you did, the game would not perform as well. That's a guarantee. And because there's always, like, I know in the minds of some people, they think like, well, we have a better hardware, so it should be running things, or those developers were more competent because they managed to do this. No, it's a different game. A different game that has a different technique. Actually, I don't know what other comparison can I do with current generation, because even God of War Ragnarok came out for the PS4. So I'm being honest here. You cannot expect something to look like God of War and be an open world game with a camera, with a wide camera angle, whether it's third person or first person, and would be all this cinematic bits and bobs. So that's one of the things that you have to take into account, and one of the reasons why you see these games that were developed for old generation consoles looking better than many games nowadays. And I think one of the issues is the fact that a lot of AAA developers think that every game needs to be open world. And I understand why they want open world, because with open worlds, they can increase playtime, they can keep you in the game, and they can keep you wanting to buy those DLCs, those little skins, those little XP boosters, those little things that make you, I don't know, probably your horse run faster or something like that. And even if counting the side quests for this game, I don't think this game is that long. So I believe if we were getting more focused experience, because I do believe God of War, and I'm talking about God of War 2018. I'm not talking about God of War Ragnarok. That has another conversation when it comes to this. And if you'd like to see that video, just let me know in the comments below, and we'll take a look at Ragnarok. But the reason why we're not getting more games that look like this is because of focus. Everything needs to be super big and have hundreds of hours and have support for like 5 more years. I remember Assassin's Creed Valhalla had support for so many years with this. Now, when it comes to the main character, Kratos, he's done by character artist Rafael Grassetti. He is the Kojima of the character art world. So if there was such a thing, guy is a genius, is a fantastic artist, and he is the one who made Kratos. And as you can see here, he even made what I think are the blend shapes, because that's one of the things that this game has, is there is so much attention to detail on the characters. You can see like the motion of the axe, the fact that there is a place on his back to be hanged, and it's not just, you know, stuck together with, I don't know, a magnet like it was in previous games. There's an actual place to put the axe. There's also all the cloth and all the motion that they have. Everything is so well done. And the fact that they decided to do blend shapes, especially on a character as muscular as Kratos, because that's one of the things that, and I usually don't complain about this because I know it's a technical limitation. It takes a long time. And in this case, it takes somebody to the level of Rafael Grassetti to think of all these things that were added to the character, where you have blend shapes when the character moves. So there is motion when you move your arms to the side. If you are, I'm a little bit of a chubby guy, but if you are muscular like Kratos and you move your arms like this, you can see that there is a little bit of motion on the muscles. The muscles contract and relax. That's their purpose. You don't see in regular weighted characters. So when you're animating characters and you weigh them, you do the weight mapping thing. Usually you don't have this. The way that they're doing it right now, there is a thing in Unreal Engine where you can use machine learning. You put the blend shapes in Maya, it learns. I'm not 100% sure how it works, but I know it has to do with machine learning. It has to do with blend shapes, where you have various different motions from the body, and you can mimic these motions that you have. And again, this is mostly to do with muscular characters that don't have a lot of clothes on them. If you have a lot of clothes on your character, then to be fair, this doesn't matter. There's not going to be a lot of muscle deformation if you have a lot of stuff on your character. Let's go to Blender. Let's look at Kratos. Okay, here we are in Blender, and we got Kratos, the God of War here. He is, the way that he is built is very interesting, but before we go into the geometry and all the things that we do in the dissected videos here on the channel, let's look at the character design for a moment. See, he is built a little bit different than what he used to look, and by that, if you remember from God of War 3, you can see that he was a little bit limber in kind of like the waist area. And by that, I don't mean that he's fat, because he isn't. He is like probably 2% body fat. I know nowadays when it comes to Hollywood and stuff, you see that usually the actors will pump up their shoulders, their biceps, and their pecs. Sometimes the trapezius. Even if you look at somebody like The Rock, that is the usual build. But instead, when you look at Kratos, you can see that his, like, the main bulk of his muscles is like on his back, on his chest, and on his abdomen, because these are very powerful muscles. Actually, you can see them in power lifters. You like the people that do strongman, they have big bellies, and usually those bellies are not because of fat. That's pure muscle underneath that, and that's what they're trying to convey here with the character design, how powerful and how strong he is, because the strength is not only necessary from the arms, it comes a lot from your core. Now, other than that, you can see the amazing detail. Even with here that I don't have the complete shader, everything that you're seeing right here is the diffuse or color mixed with the normal maps. And just with that, without any fancy lighting whatsoever, aside from this issue that I have right here, and this has to do with the fact that in game they have skim temp maps, and with temp I mean color temperature, not heat maps. So I'm pretty sure that they changed the coloring of his skins with those maps, because those I couldn't find a way to put them here in Blender, but that's probably part of the material. Also, the way that his tattoo is laid out with some like a decal. It's more like a decal fashion, which also serves as another piece of geometry to kind of remove or like blend the scene. Because as you can see, these are two separate parts when it comes to like the arms, this and the torso. I think this has to do with how customizable Kratos is in this game. Just by looking at this without all of the fancy stuff that's happening in the engine, you can see that this character it's one of the best characters that I've ever seen. Like, I know there's a difference between stylized and realistic, but objectively, design-wise, quality-wise, fidelity-wise, this is one of the best characters out there. Now, I mentioned that there's something particular about the Kratos model. You can see what that difference is right off the bat. Can you tell the difference? Without watching the rest of the video, let me know in the comment sections down below if this is something new to you. Now, we can see over here from the stats that this is a high-ish poly character. Now, nowadays, if you have seen my other videos on the series, you'll see that 124,000 polygons is actually not that much. We've seen characters that are a little bit higher than this for current generation, but this is a character that was for the old generation. And even then, you can see how dense Kratos is. But one of the things that calls to your attention is the difference in density between this part, like upper body, and lower body, which has a lot to do with how the camera is positioned. Usually, you don't see Kratos in full. If you pay attention to most of the camera angles, most of the scenery, especially the close-up ones, are focused from his waist up, or maybe close to his face. Whenever you see his full body, he's usually doing something like going around and killing a big monster, killing a troll, or even when you are walking, the way that your camera is positioned over the shoulder, it is different from the density that you can see from his torso, because at this distance, his torso is pretty much a purple blob, but I can still define all the triangles from his legs. So this is the first character where I've seen this happen. Let me know if you know of other video games where you've seen this happen so far. At least in the Dissected series, this is the first time that I've seen a character like this that has a specific focus. And again, this has to do with the technicalities and why this game looks the way that it looks, and why other games, even though this is old gen, why other games don't look this way, because of everything that was thought about when making this character. Now, you can see even from the density that it is a good flow all around the polygons, and you can see from here how the geometry is following all the curvatures from his torso muscle. Even over here, if we look at it from this angle, you can see that the indentation on his pectoralis, you can see that it is in fact geometry, all the frontal deltoids, the triceps, the biceps, and you can even see the brachialis. Usually you don't see the brachialis on a lot of characters because people like to go like this and see like bicep, tricep, and there's nothing in between. But usually when you have somebody as muscular as Kratos, you can usually see the brachialis right here. That is pretty cool. And the back muscles, they're all there, the rhomboids, the trapezoid. everything is not only detailed with normal maps, but also detailed with geometry. And I would say that what the normal maps are doing here is mostly adding the detail for like the skin imperfections, and you can see the little bumps and orange peel that it's part of his skin that makes it look even more realistic. But there are no, I wouldn't say the normal maps are doing the lifting of the muscle detail, because muscle detail is already there with the geometry. But all the while, and I'm not quadrangulating this character because of how cool it looks as it is. We've talked a lot about flow. If you're a character artist and you're interested in looking at flow, the flow of polygons from a AAA, I have a whole playlist where I go over a lot of models where I quadrangulate it and I show how the topology flows, especially from the fingers, because usually there's a bit of the topology that's hard to do. So, but I'm not gonna do that here because just there's so much to investigate on this model. And aside from that, you can see like the greaves, the difference in density also has to do with what is on your character. So in this case, you have these bracers, these parts are metallic, so there's a little bit of triangulation there. There's not as much density, there's not necessarily. Another reason why he is so dense, by the way, is because of the blend shapes. When you have blend shapes, the more geometry you have, the better it's going to look. If you do blend shapes with a lower poly object, it's just going to look jagged and pulled, and believe me, I tried. It looks awful. So whenever you do blend shapes, and that's why the metahumans are usually on the higher poly count when it comes to characters. In this high-end studios where you see these masterpieces made, there's always a thought behind the process on why something was made. It's not because the developer thought, oh, that just looks cool. In cases like this, there's always a purpose to it. So if we keep going, we can see the geometry of everything. Let me just take out the texture so you can appreciate the geometry a little bit more. And you can see the change of density between his legs and his torso. And if we isolate the legs, it's an open mesh. There's no welding here. However, the shoes is part of the legs, which I'm pretty sure it's done for rigging purposes. But yeah, you can see how the polygons get bigger and bigger as we go up, especially because this is a covered part. Like there's usually a loincloth or something on top of it with all the customization that you can do. Now, when I was pulling out this model, I just pulled out kind of like the classic armor. I think I'm missing a piece here. There was just so many things on him. The way that the files are structured in game is that the player character, in this case Kratos, everything is on him. Like everything that you can think of comes in that file. By the way, the same thing happens to Atreus. Atreus came out as one file with all of his customization inside of him. If you want to see Atreus or any of the characters from God of War, just let me know in the comment sections down below. Another thing that caught my attention is, even though it's how much geometry is dedicated to this, and this is a small item, something that if this, usually the game is probably this distance, this is an item that's usually here, and I don't remember, I'm playing through the whole game again, but I don't remember a time where he pulls out his knife. He always used the axe or the chaos blades. So if you know what this, if you know if there is a point where you use this knife, let me know, but I don't remember. At least in the God of War 2018, we're not talking about Ragnarok, but in 2020, I don't remember what he does with that knife. There are the ashes, here are the ashes of his wife. And, well, you can see that his beard is pretty much just hair cards. Just hair cards, because even on the highest, best looking game that I can remember from last gen, grooms are still not a thing. And you can see that the eyebrows are just kind of like an extracted portion of the geometry that's already in there. So eyebrows don't, when you're doing eyebrows, you don't have to do like the beard or the mustache. You can just do something like this, where it just goes and it follows the same topology. It's just kind of like a shell, and you just add the the alpha maps in there. The other thing that's interesting is even though he's bald and you're always looking at his head, you can see how the geometry goes from being super high here. You can actually tell where the seam is between this part of the geometry and the scalp. Now again, everything has a purpose, so I'm guessing the reason why this is so high and this isn't is because there isn't any movement here. As far as I know, there are some temporal muscles here on the skull, but there is no movement here. I don't know anybody that can move their hair like this, so that's not something that is on the character, and that's why optimization kicks in. If this isn't gonna move, if it's not gonna have blend shapes, then let's reduce it until it still looks great. When it comes to Kratos, they want to have the highest fidelity when it comes to his textures. So you can see there's a ton of textures that are separated into different maps, like his body, his head, the loincloth. You can see that the pants are a separate map and how it's laid out. If we get out of here and we go to his arms, you can see how everything is laid out and everything is in the 0 to 1 space. There's nothing that's mirror outside because in case there's some asymmetry, but it's very interesting how everything is unwrapped. And I think the way that this is unwrapped is just to make the least amount of distortion possible. But you can see how the fingers are all laid out here. Same thing with the hands and the arms. Here's the elbow. Again, this is a very high density character just laid out in one single map. If we keep going, let's look at the head. You can see that this is kind of like butterfly, as we've seen all the time with other characters. However, you can see that there is separation between the lower portion of his head and the neck portion that goes into the trapezius muscle and almost getting into the clavicle area. Oh yeah, it's part of the clavicle area that encompasses this. And you can see how the eyes are big here. I've seen some characters online from people that have the eyes open. That means that you're not going to be able to animate those. Usually, if you want to animate your eyes, this is how they will look in the UVs, because you need to have textures for your eyelids. Now in here, you can see how everything is laid out. And if we keep going, just for the sake of it, you can see how the textures are laid out. It's pretty much how you lay down armor that isn't completely solid, especially with leather, but everything is laid out, at least in the parts where it comes to the armor, with not a lot of space in between the UV islands, as opposed to what we saw with the hands, the arms, and everything else. Now, this is something that you need to take into account if you're an indie dev. You have to balance between draw calls. So I've already explained draw calls in my optimization video. And how much quality do you want in your games? In this case, they are very focused, especially in the camera wise, with what they're rendering, that they can afford to have this many draw calls on a character. So God of War 2018, have you played it? Did you like it? Have you played it on PC? Because I played it on PS4 when it came out, and I played it on PC, and it's a totally different game. When you're playing at such a high frame rate and with everything maxed out, the game looks fantastic on PC. This is one of those games where I didn't mind buying it a second time just to experience this thing again. Do you want to see more about God of War? Do you want to see other characters? Do you want to see God of War Ragnarok? Because there's that possibility. Let me know in the comment sections down below. Thank you so much for watching all the way till this point. I know this has been a little bit of a longer video, but there's just so much to unpack with this game. Remember to subscribe, give it a like, leave a comment, helps the algorithm. I'll see you in the next one.